Welcome back. As the new year begins, often a time for self-reflection and looking for new self-management measures in place, many of us do not know how to start the journey of personal development. Mental illness has become one of the leading buzzwords since the COVID-19 pandemic, despite it being prevalent for many years, but many of us may not know where to start to seek help. Let's speak about how one can start a mental wellness journey and how they should know when they should seek help. Founder of Trove Wellness and Mental Health, Juanita Khumalo, joins us now. Ms. Khumalo, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and a happy new year to you. Now, the start of a new year is the perfect time to turn a new page, but is it really the most reasonable time to start working on resolutions?
So I always have this belief that New Year's, of course, presents something new, a new awakening, a fresh start and fresh opportunity to start planning. However, I always say that prepare yourself, because if you don't prepare yourself, you'll be setting yourself up for failure. So it's the 1st of January, so just don't deep dive into something without having thought about how is it going to work like, analyzing your environment and analyzing to see what potential factors or barriers are there. So I always say, ease yourself into something. And by easing yourself into something is by saying, okay, cool, this is what I'm trying to achieve, or this is what the goal is, the big goal. And then break it down into smaller pieces. And then from there on, when you break it down into smaller pieces, it gets easier to tackle. So for example, if you're trying to exercise and you've got children at home, that is potentially, let's just say, one of your barriers. So instead of like working out during normal time, wake up an hour earlier while you have new time and work then. So identify what could potentially hinder or what could potentially sabotage whatever goals it is that you have, and then plan from there. And the most important part, of course, like I always say, is consistency and habits. Smaller chunks and do something every single day, one bit at a time. It just seems so big and unattainable.
So making it reasonable is the trick here, because, I mean, many of us do not know how to keep New Year's resolutions, Juanita, despite our good intentions. Does this speak to our willpower?
It does not speak to your willpower. It simply speaks to the fact that you have not empowered yourself enough. Hence why I say you're setting yourself up for failure, versus if you plan something more, if you see yourself a grace period, therefore you are better able to sustain your New Year's resolution. So for example, if your plan is to quit alcohol or go off sugar or start exercising, always say don't do everything at the exact same time. Instead of having 5 teaspoons of sugar, phase it out to 4. And then eventually the second week to 3.5 or 3, gradually. It's when you go cold turkey that you basically shock your system, you shock your immune system, you shock your nervous system, and essentially it's something you're going to automatically, inverted commas, fail. And then you're going to internalize it. And the problem with that is that it has nothing to do with willpower, just your inability to have prepared yourself, phase yourself into something. So you're going to crash, and then you're going to not meet any of the New Year's resolutions, goals that you've set for yourself, and that's a negative cycle, because you're going to internalize it, and that's where the problem begins, and that's where it goes haywire, and that essentially is how eating disorders start. That's how depression or anxiety start, because you basically have internalized it and just not set yourself up for success by preparing and breaking things into smaller chunks. If you haven't exercised before, for example, start by walking, and then increase your stuff, and then start jogging, and thereafter increase your sprints or your time. So breaking down things to smaller pieces, that helps quite a lot in terms of easing yourself into it. If your goal, for example, is to take care and harness your mental well-being, instead of going cold turkey and saying you're going to cut off social media, you're going to do all these many things all at the exact same time, it's not going to work. Once again, you're setting yourself up for failure, and it has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower, but just lack of planning and lack of having strategy when you tackle such things.
Speaking of strategy, while you're taking this in bite-sized chunks, should you set yourself targets? So if maybe I take 5 teaspoons of sugar and every week I'm just lessening by 1 teaspoon? Or should I just see as it goes? How do you ensure that it works best in terms of me reaching the ultimate goal? Do I set targets in between?
You definitely need to set targets in between, because if you don't, then it's just a goal that's in your mind. It's just an idea. So for example, if you're trying to lose weight, if you say the goal is 20 kilograms and then phase it out, okay, cool. The healthy amount of weight loss in general is between 0.4 kilograms to 1 kilogram per week, ideally. So then you take it down backward and you say 20 kilograms divided by X amount of 0.4 kilograms ideally per week. How many days does that give you? And then you break it down into, okay, 4 kilograms or 3 kilograms per month. And then you say, on average, this should be your goal per month in terms of your weight loss. When something is not on paper or concrete or written down, it's just an idea. It's just some fantasy that you actually have. So having a strategy of actually writing and documenting things basically helps you. Mainly also because when it's written down, there's a greater sense of accountability and greater sense of need to achieve it. And when you take something off, done. And gives you the greater excitement and the need to basically jump onto the next. So it really tackling it. And
so when we do then fall off the wagon with regards to our goals, how soon should you get back on? Or can you give yourself some time to get a little bit of a reprieve and then 2-3 weeks later you start again with those little targets? What would you best advise?
So there's 2 ways. So majority of the time, I always say that you can either do that, or alternatively, you can just continue as normal. So for example, just because you had 1 bad day or 2-3 off days, it doesn't mean that now you should just go up in arms, become depressed and sad, thinking your entire goal is completely gone. So what normally happens is when you set these goals, leave a bit of grace or room for not meeting your target. I always say that apply the 80-20 rule. There was 80% you're going to try and stick to the plan, but also understand that there's a 20% which accommodates the fact that you are human, life happens, circumstances changes, and all our circumstances are completely different. So once you give yourself that room, it basically helps you to not completely fall off. And basically that's why it's important to have that balance between your 80-20 rule. And if you have 1 day of inverted commas eating bad or 2 days, it doesn't mean that you completely fall in that bandwagon. The next day, pick yourself up and continue. I always say we fail forward, and you need to get it more times right than more times wrong. Fundamentally, that's the key thing. So you just keep it moving. If you had a weekend where you overindulge and don't internalize it, allow yourself grace. And when your plan has an 80-20 balance or strategy, basically it means that it's healthy, because no one is going to stick to something 100%. We're human, and life is all about being enjoyed. Your fitness, wellness, mental well-being journey is not supposed to be a chore. Fundamentally, it's a lifestyle change. It's a forever lifestyle change. So you need to have that, because when you give yourself a bit of room, you're giving yourself a little bit of grace. So continue as normal. And if you feel like, you know what, why you failed, hence why you need to analyze it. If you feel like, you know what, you didn't prepare yourself enough, therefore you take a couple of steps back, and you try and say, why did this not work out? And when you have those answers as to why this worked out or not, then you work yourself backward. And then you realize that maybe I didn't actually give myself enough. The strategy didn't work. Going cold turkey didn't work. So what do I do now? I analyze your why. I always say that your why is very important. And when you do such kind of things, you need to understand that it has to come from you, not family members, not the external world. You need to be from you. So you need to understand, why are you doing this? What could have happened or what went wrong? How can it be mitigated? How do I empower myself to better be able to stick to this journey the next time, a longer time? So hence why it's a twofold approach, and either one of them could potentially work depending on your circumstances or potentially what happened.
All right, Juanita, thank you so much for joining us this morning. That's Juanita Khumalo from the Trove Wellness and Mental Health Institution. We do apologize for the poor quality in that line, but thank you so much for being with us this morning.